This week in Destiny for November 14th, 2024. Revenant Act II releases next week, so we have a look at artifact perks. Roaming supers have been buffed, some huge nerfs coming to some of your favorite exotics. Precision bow damage increases, Telesto being Telesto, exotic armor changes, and much more. Welcome Guardians, let's take a look. So this week in Destiny first begins by talking about the Act II developer livestream that went down on Tuesday. We recapped all of that in a previous video, but let's talk about the new artifact perks briefly. For the episode so far, each act has added a new column of perks. The first one here in column 1 for Revenant Act II is authorized mods melee. The armor energy cost of all armor mods affecting your melee are significantly discounted. In column 2, we have Emergency Flare. Emergency reinforcements consumes all but one armor charge. Column 3 is the thick of it. Rapid final blows while surrounded grant you armor charge. And for boost, while you are surrounded, your weapons have increased handling. Swords gain increased charge rate. For column 4, we have Curative Orbs. The first time you break a target shield or break the shield of a guardian using their super, you create an orb of power. For boost, picking up an orb of power, an elemental pickup, or a tangle grants you a small amount of health. And lastly, in column 5, we have arc compounding. Arc sources deal increased damage to blind targets. Let's next take a look at some sandbox updates coming with Act II. The first big change comes with roaming supers. Starting with Act II, Bungie will be changing the damage-based recharge parameters for all roaming supers against PvE combatants, and increasing the amount of super energy gained when damaging combatants by roughly 3 times the amount of what it is today. The intent here is that you are more likely to have a roaming super when you need it for that panic activation or to jump to an enemy spawn point. As a reference, if you were using between 3 and 5 Nova Bombs, say while playing in Advanced Nightfall, you can now charge around 6 to 8 Nova Warp activations in the same activity. In addition to this, they're upping the damage roaming supers do against champions by 30 to 55% depending on the super. This roughly brings all roaming supers to a similar damage profile against champions and will give them a distinct advantage in your next Grandmaster Nightfall over a one-off super. You can expect the changes to the following supers. Next up, we have electrifying exotic armor updates. Bungie is overall happy about the changes they've made for Act 1, but they think there are some further changes that will help a few exotics that are still struggling in the sandbox. They've also made a change to reduce the potency of certain hunter helmets in the Crucible. First up, point contact cannon brace. Bungie feels that the lightning strikes provided by point contact cannon brace are the main focal point of using the exotic, but they lack build crafting depth beyond being visually flashy. So now amplified lightning bolts do 100% increased damage over base, up from 50%. Lightning strike defeats now also refund melee energy, and they have reduced thunderclap refund by 10% to compensate for increased energy gains on average. With Raid Influx, it's Bungie's goal that the 2 Arc Staff exotics have distinct identities. Blight Rangers is rooted in defense, and they want Raid Influx to be all about offense. However, they feel it can benefit from a little more punch, especially in harder activities. So Synapse Junction super damage benefit increased 20% per stack, up from 14%. Max benefit is now 70% damage increase, up from 50%. For the Baludor's Wrathweavers, Bungie is increasing the benefits of shattering targets, so increasing shatter damage up to 150% from 100 previously. They've also fixed an issue where enemies were inconsistently getting the boosted shatter damage, which led to decreased overall damage. Next up, we have a small update from the weapons team and also Telesto. Most of the weapon focus updates are aimed at PvP for this patch, and we'll discuss those in more detail in the PvP Strike Team part in a bit, but they do have a couple of small changes directed at PvE they think will help to add a little flavor back to some old favorites. First up, for breach grenade launchers, Bungie has heard the feedback about mountaintop nerfs. So they've walked back some of the speed limit reduction they previously gave to the blast damage impulse. For the micro missile frame, increase the velocity players can generate with the rocket jumping blast. Apparently Telesto had another issue, could you believe that for once? Bungie has fixed an issue with the Telesto not dealing the appropriate amount of blast damage against players in Crucible, so increased its detonation damage by 20% in PvE as well. Next, let's talk about the sandbox. The high-skill primary weapon meta over the past month has been dominated by Rose, Elsie's Rifle, Graviton Lance, and particularly Bygones, with Bygone standing out due to the effectiveness of its high ground perk. While the meta has moved away from the closer range engagements, they believe the consolidation around these specific weapons is due in large part to a combination of two things: the difficulty of engaging in medium to close range combat windows with the current level of ability uptime, and the lack of competition among their medium range primary options outside of pulse rifles. First up, let's talk about abilities. Bungie believes that the Prismatic subclasses have proven too powerful in Crucible due to complex combinations that can't be easily addressed through simple adjustments. To balance this without affecting PvE, Bungie is implementing a blanket 15% cooldown penalty on all Prismatic subclass abilities in the Crucible. Storm's Edge remains too powerful in Crucible as well, offering limited counterplay even after recent cooldown increases. So Bungie has addressed this by reducing its defensive strength and adjusted its mechanics to make it more manageable for opponents. So reduced height of damage impulse, reduced damage resistance against players from 53 to 45%, and removed from Tier 3 to Tier 1 super cooldown. Knucklehead Radar also appears to be getting a nerf, as Bungie doesn't like the ability for players to get information about PvP players without requiring them to engage in combat. So they changed how to activate the perk, which now requires the wearer to damage a player to mark the target. Target is marked for 3 seconds now, down from 7. What about changes to weapon archetypes, bows, hand cannons, and machine guns? For bows were initially nerfed to reduce long-range dominance. Precision bows now have a 10% increase in body shot damage, not affecting Le Monarch, to improve their competitive viability without overpowering them at long distances. For hand cannons, aggressive hand cannons get a damage increase by 3%, allowing them to defeat all resilience levels in PvP with 2 critical hits and 1 body shot. Igneous Hammer slightly reduced instability, handling and aim assist by 3 each to prevent it from reclaiming dominance. Better Devils has been buffed by borrowing Igneous Hammer's stats, gaining a 3-point boost in stability, handling, and aim assist. And lastly, for the hand cannons, yesterday's question, they fixed an issue with Headseeker, ensuring it now properly boosts critical hit damage after a body shot. For machine guns, Bungie has adjusted heavy ammo crate pickups to balance machine guns subclasses. Adaptive machine guns get slightly less ammo, reduced by 2 to 3 shots, and high impact and rapid fire machine guns now receive increased ammo based on magazine size. Next up, some perk adjustments, first starting with High Ground. This perk was providing too strong a damage boost with minimal effort in PvP. To address this, the stacks gained from dealing damage with a primary weapon against players have been reduced from 3 to 1, making the buff less potent in PvP while maintaining full strength in PvE. Damage with special weapons or against PvE combatants still grants maximum stats, and if this adjustment proves insufficient, further changes may include a stricter height requirement or a reduced damage bonus in PvP. Explosive Payload is also getting some changes. Previously nerfed across all weapon types, the perk's penalty was rolled back, but a targeted reduction for legendary hand cannons has now been implemented. Splash damage from explosive payload on legendary hand cannons is reduced by 7% against players, preserving full effectiveness for other weapons and exotics like Sunshot. There's a couple of changes to some exotic weapons like Telesto, Ariana's Vow, and Thorn and Lumina. For Telesto, as mentioned, they corrected an issue where it was doing less damage than intended in the Crucible. Ariana's Vow now has fixed critical damage in PvP, and Thorn and Lumina get increased base stability by 5. And lastly, from the PvP Strike team, some general Crucible updates. Since 8.1.0, Destiny 2 has been using this paired player system in Crucible for 6v6 and quick play playlist, which pairs you with players of similar skills. Compared to the previous snake draft system, paired player seems to have improved match outcomes and fairness. In Control, Mercy Rule games have decreased by 10%, and close matches increased by 7.5%. Prediction accuracy, indicating match closeness, has slightly decreased from 68% to 67%, while the percentage of evenly matched games increased from 59% to 64%. The Mercy Rule system also got some changes, so previously the score needed to trigger this Mercy Rule happened more often. Under the Revenant system, 27% of games hit the Mercy threshold, with 23% actually ending in a Mercy. As always, Bungie is looking to monitor player feedback and tweak the Mercy thresholds and all of these matchmaking changes. But Guardians, that's basically all we have for this week in Destiny. If you are interested, there's some Festival of the Lost costumes and images, and also another look at the Street Fighter collab with the Ghost image. But if you'd like to see some more Destiny news, lore, and mysteries just like this video, please be sure to subscribe to the channel. I thank you very much for watching, and I'll catch you all in the next video.